We spent what? 50% on housing last year? And that's already taking into consideration that we lived in a studio apartment, which only cost us $1,200 per month for nearly half a year. Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today in this video, I want to talk about the real cost of living in Canada, specifically in Toronto because that's where I live. And yes, I do know that it is not the same everywhere, and Toronto and of course Vancouver are among those cities where everything is most expensive. Now let's get right into it, and let's start off very simple. I want to give you a high-level overview of what we spent last year. Now looking at this pie chart, you can immediately see, no surprise here, that number one ranked expense is housing with 50.6%, followed by food 22%, and the third biggest expenses is special expenses. What are special expenses? What does that include? Don't worry, I'll get into all of that later. Now before we get into further detail, I think that I need to give you an overview of how we do accounting for our expenses. And this is a method that I sort of developed over the years. It just worked best for me, but of course you do not have to do it this way. I divide our expenses into two major categories. The first one are basic expenses, and the second category are special expenses. What I categorize as basic expenses are basic living expenses that reliably occur every month in similar amounts. Things like your rent or your mortgage, for example. Whereas special expenses are those kind of expenses that don't occur every month and not always even regularly. And this includes things like traveling, health-related expenses, that one-time purchase of a treadmill, something you do not do every month. Let's start and talk about the basic expenses. Let's go over to this table here, basic expenses, and here I'm giving you both the monthly and yearly amounts. And remember, this is still as a couple for two people. So for food, every month we spend almost $1,200, and this $1,200 consists of groceries, $700, eating out and coffees, snacking, $470, and LCBO or alcohol, $6. And I know this average is super low, but there are some health related reasons for that. We've been drinking much less alcohol lately, and hence this very small number. And for the whole year, the whole last year, we spent $14,112 for food. Now on to the next category, which is housing. On a monthly basis here, we spend $2,700. On a yearly basis, the whole last year, we spent $32,318. I know, it's crazy, it's a lot. This consists, number one, of rent and mortgage. In our case, 5 months of rent, because after that we actually moved to our condo that we purchased, so we had a bit of an overlap there. So in the end we paid 5 months of rent and 8 months of mortgage. And for those of you who know, our previous studio was super cheap, dirt cheap. We paid around $1,200 per month for that studio. Next item is hydro and water. We spent on average $84. And then there's laundry. Here I put a note. At the old place where we lived for 5 months, we actually used a coin machine, so we had to pay for laundry. And here in the new condo, we have our own washing machine, so we do not pay to wash our clothing, but of course the bill goes into hydro and water. So $32,000 per year just for housing. On to the next category, communication, and this includes internet and our phone plans. Here in total, we spend $165 per month, or $1,600 for the whole last year. And this is the breakdown. So for internet, at our old place, we had to pay for internet. It cost about $68, and last we used Bell. But then when we moved to our condo, luckily internet was already included in the maintenance fee. But yes, then there was the maintenance fee. So here we have my husband's phone plan. His is $57 per month, and mine is on average $39.7, and the reason is because I switched from Koodo, where I previously paid 50 something or $60 perhaps, to Public Mobile in October, and now I only pay $16.95 per month for my phone bill. Next up is transportation, for which we spend $163 per month, or almost $2,000 per year. And some of you might be wondering, how can you spend only that little money per month, per year on transportation? Don't you have to pay for gas, parking, and so on? For those of you who don't know yet, we don't own a car here in Toronto. We don't drive. Previously, we lived in Indonesia and we did drive, and we're sick of driving. We're sick of the traffic. So we're quite happy that Toronto has a quite functioning public transportation system, although it is not perfect, but overall for us it is much more affordable than owning a car. We're saving so much money by not having a car and using the TTC. So this is the breakdown. The $163 consists of transit for my husband, for which he spent on average $77.5. I spend $58.3 per month, so it's a bit less because I work at home more, while he's working in a hybrid system where on some days he works at home, some days he goes to the office, so that's why he spends more for the TTC. And lastly, we also have Uber and Lyft. Yes, once in a while we do take an Uber or Lyft, especially in the winters when it gets really cold and we get home at night after something and we just don't want to wait for the bus or the subway, and we just take an Uber or Lyft. The last item that falls under basic expenses are donations, for which we spend $178 per month, or a bit over $2,000 per year. And yes, this includes donations to the church, to charity, but also includes a little bit of support to family members. So the subtotal of our basic expenses for the two of us, expenses that occur every month, were $52,156 for the whole last year. Per month, that comes down to $4,346. And if we calculate it on a per person basis, it is $2,173. But a very important note here, for this per person number, you really need to take it with a grain of salt, because a lot of things that are in this list are things that we share. For example, our small studio apartment, our utilities. When you live as a couple or with a roommate, you have the benefit of sharing all these expenses, and hence this rather low amount. But if you live on your own, if you rent your own place, then of course $2,000 per month will just not be enough in a city like Toronto. I would say that our food bill is rather high, so it's not as low as it can be. And one of the reasons is that we really pay a lot of attention to what we eat, to our nutrition, and we try to buy high quality food. And yes, that does include meat, seafood, cheese, and a lot of organic produce as well. But if you ask me, can you get by with less? Then definitely. If you have a much more simple meal plan, and if you do not buy organic, I would say that one person could get by with $300 to $400 per month for food, provided they rarely eat out. And yes, we also eat out. We eat out on average maybe twice per week, so 8 times per month. And once in a while we also buy coffee outside, have some snacks, so that's included in this budget. And by the way, guys, I'd be really curious to know, how much do you guys spend living in Canada, if you're already living in Canada? If you're in Toronto, do you spend more or less than we spend? And what about other cities? I would really love to know what living in other cities aside from Toronto and Vancouver costs. Is it really much cheaper, or is it similar? Now, one thing that you might be asking is, what about clothing and all the other expenses that one might have? So while I just talked about basic living expenses, part A, things like clothing, etc., will fall under special expenses, part B, which I will get to in a second. One really important thing to keep in mind, guys, is that all these expenses for everything is paid with after-tax money, and that's something that I just recently became more aware of. So let's say, for example, that your living expenses as a single person are $35,000 and you earn $60,000. So at first glance, someone who's not familiar with Canada or taxation in general might think, yoo, I have $25,000 left to spend on things that I want or save or invest. But unfortunately, there's this thing called taxes. So if we plug in this income number of $60,000 into this TurboTax calculator, $60,000, and let's assume you're living in Ontario, after taxes, so federal taxes, provincial taxes, CPP, EI premiums, your total taxes are $13,798. This is just an estimation, by the way. You are left with an after-tax income of $46,200. the disposable income that you actually have after taxes that you get to spend made me even more conscious of every dollar I spent. And also, more importantly, that if I do not save and invest enough, then over the years, there will be almost nothing left of that money. So yes, it's so important to save and invest. And even if you haven't started yet, it is not too late. And just in case you're still looking for an investment platform, I just want to let you know that I've been using Wealth Simple for the last 3 years. And I'm not claiming that it is the best because honestly, I have not tried out all the investment platforms. But so far, I must say that I'm pretty happy with it. It's been pretty reliable and also very easy to use. And what I like most of all is that they charge $0 commission for stock and ETF trading. In case you do sign up and you fund your account, I do receive a small commission of $25. But so do you, because at the moment, Wealth Simple has a campaign where every person who signs up and funds their account using the link in my descriptions below will get a sign-up bonus of $25 as well. So win-win. Now let's move on to part B, which are special expenses. So I set up this category of special expenses for those kind of expenses that do not occur regularly or monthly, but either once a year or several times a year. Item number 1, on travel, last year we spent $1,750. Then there's a category of one-offs. One-offs are things like moving costs that we have when we move to our new condo, home blessings, so things that wouldn't happen every year. For that, we spent $1,600 for the whole year, or $134 per month. Next category, health. So health in our case includes things like supplements, sport equipment, like a scale, a digital scale, barbells, and other special health expenses. So this will differ largely from person to person depending on your needs. In our case, we spent a whopping $2,700 last year, or an average $228 per month. Then there's the category of cosmetics. So yeah, these are things like face creams, sheet masks, mascara, makeup remover, and so on. And for that, we spend $780. Next up, we have gifts. You know, those birthdays, those red packets you give out for Chinese New Year, thank you gifts, and so on. And that amounted to almost $1,000 per year, or $77 per month. Next category is clothing. And for that, the two of us, by the way, this is for 2 people, we spent $1,076 per year, or an average $90 per month. And I am happy to say that both my husband and I were pretty even in this category. I perhaps spend 55% of the budget, he spends 45% of it, but it's quite even. And yes, clothing includes that winter jacket and also shoes, sneakers, flip-flops, bathing suits, accessories, like earrings, etc. So everything that we wear falls under clothing. Next category is furniture and home. So this includes things like my water boiler, my French press, bathroom scrubber, shower filter, everything that we use in our home that is not part of our monthly bill. And for that, we spent $1,500 last year. On one hand, this was a bit high because we just moved to our new condo, so there were a ton of expenses. But on the other hand, this is rather low because we didn't make any significant furniture purchases. Next up are subscriptions, for which we paid $565 for the whole last year, or almost $50 per month. Subscriptions here does not include our phone bill and internet, because those are things that occur on a monthly basis. So subscriptions here, this might perhaps be interesting to you. I know it's called subscriptions for the reason because you subscribe and then you use the service continuously. But no, that's not how we do it, because we want to save money. We usually subscribe for something for a month or 2 or even 3, and then we unsubscribe for most things, not all things. Other things like Netflix or Paramount Plus, oftentimes we only subscribe 1 month, 2 months, and we watch all our favorite shows and series in that time, and then we unsubscribe for a few months, and then if we want to watch something again, we subscribe again. Next category is work, and this category only applies to my husband for his work-related expenses because he actually goes to the office, whereas I, like I said, mostly work at home. And this is the reality that many people do not take into consideration, which is that if you need to go to the office to work, there are a lot of expenses that are often unaccounted for. So for one, transportation, but we already included that under our TDC bill. Then there are meals and snacks, because when you go to the office, you just tend to buy more food outside or buy coffee outside. And then there's also socializing. Sometimes after work, you meet colleagues for a drink and so on. All of that costs money. Anyways, in our case, we spent $430 for the whole last year, or $36 on average per month. Next category, books and learning. For that, we spent $106. And this is a relatively small amount because we buy most books as Kindle books. And believe it or not, there are a ton of books out there, especially classics, which you can get for either free or only $1 or $2. Next category is electronics and gadgets. And for that, we spent $23 for the whole year. I know it's unbelievable. It even doesn't make sense to calculate the monthly average. Because I have my business, I am a content creator, most of the electronics that I buy, I can include as my business expense. They're deductible. For example, the iMac that I bought last year, or my ring light, or my additional key light, and so on. I can put that all under my business expenses, so I do not include it in our own household expenses. Last category, stationery, and same reasoning here, and that is why we only spend $18 for our personal stationery usage. Okay, now we've arrived at the subtotal B, special expenses. For the whole year, we spent $11,553. So you see, it adds up. So on a monthly basis, we spent almost $1,000 on this special expense category. If we calculate this per person, that's almost $500 extra. Now we've arrived at the exciting part, and that is where we will tie everything together in our grand total under total expenses here. So here you have it, total expenses, monthly averages for us as a couple. For basic expenses, last year per month on average, we spent $4,388. And on special expenses, on average, we spent $963. So as our grand total, last year on average as a couple, we spent $5,350 each month. And let's just do a quick calculation. If we multiply this by 12 months, that gives us $64,203. Remember, again, this is after tax money. And for all those pie chart lovers out there, here's the pie chart to it. Even if we add up special expenses to basic expenses, everything, still housing tops the chart at number 1 with 50.6% of the total expenses. Number 2 is food, 22%. Then that category of special expenses, 18%. And then you have those smaller categories. And of course, in your case, it might look very, very different. And you might also choose to use a different categorization depending on what you want to track. Here are the total expenses per person. But again, take it with a grain of salt, like I said, because the calculation doesn't work as straightforward as this, but just to give you a very, very general idea. So basic expenses per month, about $2,200 per person, and $500 for special expenses, which brings us to $2,675 per person per month. So to be more realistic, I would say that if you're no longer a student, you would need to, as a single person who does not share a unit with someone else, you would need to prepare for at least $3,000. Phew. So guys, this turned out to be a rather long video, but I do hope that this was helpful to you and that this was insightful in some way. And by the way, if you want to finally start investing and you're still looking for an investment platform to invest on, then yeah, check out Wealth Simple. My referral link is down in the descriptions below. And when you open the account and fund it, you will get a $25 bonus as well as I. And if you're looking for more videos on how to finally start building wealth in Canada, then this video up here might be useful to you. As always, thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you pretty soon in the next video. Bye!